Bienvenue à la réunion du 19e, la réunion numéro 19 du comité spécial sur la déclaration de situation de crise.
Point of order, Chair. I have no translation through.
No translation? OK. Alors, c'est prêt? Est-ce que...
Can you hear me? Can you hear us? Very well. So I'll start again. Thank you, Mr. Motz. I call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 19 of the Special Joint Committee on the Declaration of Emergency, created pursuant to the House of Commons Order of March 2nd, 2022, and the Senate Order of March 3rd, 2022. Today's meeting is being conducted in a hybrid format pursuant to the Senate and House orders. If there were to be any technical problems, please let me know so that we can, if need be, suspend the meeting for a few minutes to allow all members to fully participate in the meeting. Witness should also be aware that translation or interpretation is available via the globe icon at the bottom of their screens. At this point, I'm not sure if the tests were done, Madam Clerk. The test with the online witnesses, yes. And that was successful, yes. Okay, then the tests have been completed and were successful. So I'd like to welcome our witnesses this evening. From the City of Windsor, Mr. Drew Dilkens, Mayor, and from the Village of Coutts, Jim Willett, Mayor. And before we begin with our witnesses, as you know, our routine motion allows for each of the witnesses to have 5 minutes for their opening statements. In the case of Mr. Dilkens, he asked for 10 minutes for his opening statement. As far as I'm concerned, I'm prepared to grant that unless there is an objection in the room, in which case it would be the routine motions, 5 minutes. Otherwise, 10 minutes for Mr. Dilkens for his presentation. Is that fine? Yes. Thank you, Mr. Dilkens. You have the floor.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I will try and come in under the allotted time. Mr. Chair and members of the Senate and of the House of Commons, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. On November the 7th, I appeared before Commissioner Rouleau and the Public Order Emergency Commission. The illegal blockade of the Ambassador Bridge in the City of Windsor, which began on February 7th, 2022, disrupted trade and posed a major risk to the national economy. The blockade also had a profound negative impact on the city and its residents, schools, and businesses until the matter was resolved peacefully and the bridge reopened shortly after midnight on February the 14th. I want to express my profound gratitude to all members of law enforcement at the Windsor Police Service, the OPP, the RCMP, and other policing partners who worked effectively together and did an exemplary job in quickly and safely clearing the illegal occupation and maintaining the security of Huron Church Road for over $400 million in goods that travel this crossing each day. As I testified at the Commission earlier this month, as Mayor of Windsor, I felt that I had the ear of both federal and provincial government representatives at the highest levels, including Ministers Mendicino, Blair, Ontario Solicitor General Jones, Premier Ford, and Prime Minister Trudeau. My staff were in contact and coordinated with political staff across federal and provincial ministers' offices and the security establishment. At the same time, Windsor Police Service, OPP, and RCMP worked through the appropriate chain of command to secure the resources necessary to help clear the occupation in a safe and efficient way. The system worked as it should in response to the unprecedented blockade that threatened the economic well-being of our entire country. The invocation of the Emergencies Act was an unprecedented response, and while I was not consulted prior to the invocation, I supported this response as it sent a clear signal that repeated attempts to blockade the Ambassador Bridge after February 14th would no longer be tolerated by Canadian officials. No doubt, this sent an important signal to our U.S. trading partners that Canadian supply chains would remain accessible, and Canada would act to ensure the crossing would not be blocked again. The City of Windsor estimates approximately $5.7 million in unforeseen costs, including extra policing costs, to clear the illegal blockade and address the ongoing need to secure Huron Church Road for the benefit of the entire province and, frankly, for the entire nation. It is unreasonable to expect municipal taxpayers to bear the financial brunt of emergencies that have provincial and national implications. The City has asked the Ontario and federal governments for financial support since March of this year, and our request remains unfilled. While appearing before Justice Rouleau and the Public Order Emergency Commission, I said the blockade of the Ambassador Bridge represented a new type of phenomena. And while the City of Windsor is responsible for local infrastructure and Windsor Police is capable of providing adequate and effective law enforcement to our community, there is an obvious need for broader collaboration and support from the provincial and federal governments to bolster the safety and security of our borders. I urge members and senators to support Windsor's proposal for all three levels of government to collaboratively study and develop a long-term sustainable strategy to protect our critical border infrastructure and ensure that all three levels of government work effectively together to prevent and respond to disturbances that threaten to choke our national economy. The planning process must include border municipalities like Windsor to ensure that any framework appropriately supports local authorities at the front line of emergency response, to ensure the resulting strategy prioritizes local and community concerns, provides sufficient resources and tools for municipalities to build community resilience, and responds to all hazards that may threaten critical infrastructure in their borders. This is of particular importance where a federally regulated piece of infrastructure is in a municipal community. Thank you for your attention, and I'm pleased to answer any questions in support of the committee's mandate.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Wilkins. Actually, it took you 3 minutes and 50 seconds for your opening statement, so far from 10 minutes. But one thing I noticed is that perhaps you were speaking a little quickly. I haven't heard any comments from the interpreters, but if there is anything, perhaps they will let me know, and I will let the witnesses know. So perhaps you can respond and a little more slowly so that we can really capture everything that you say. So let's start with the first round of questions. 5 minutes. Sorry, no, actually, thank you, Madam Clerk. We have Mr. Willett, the mayor from Coutts. You have 5 minutes, sir, for your opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good evening, everyone. It's a honor to be here. I don't have a political statement to give to you. I will just quickly run through the bullet points on what went on for the 18 days of the protest and blockade here in Coutts. As you said, my name's Jim Willett. I'm the mayor of Coutts. I've been a resident since 2013. I've been a member of Village Council for 5 years and mayor for 4. Village of Coutts, as you know, is located in southern Alberta at the border. Coutts does not have its own amenities aside from a convenience store, a restaurant, and a bank. The village is policed by provincial RCMP, a detachment of 4 RCMP officers in the town of Milk River that services the village of Coutts. On the afternoon of January 26th, I saw a social media post promoting slow roll protest in Alberta. On January 27th, about 2 days prior to the border blockade, I saw another social media post stating there'd be an attempt to block the border as part of the protest. On January 27th, I wrote to the Solicitor General at the time, Sonia Savage, to advise her of the plan to protest. I got a call the next morning from a spokesperson in the Solicitor General's office who explained the RCMP was aware of the situation and I didn't have anything to worry about. On January 29th, the convoy drove up to the Coutts border crossing. I observed the RCMP escorting the convoy to the eventual location of the blockade, the intersection with Highway 500, which is 1.3 kilometers before the border crossing, or north. Here, the convoy made a U-turn, returned back north up Highway 4, but about 45 minutes later, vehicles drove onto the median and ditches and blocked the road. My first concern and responsibility, of course, was emergency access, both incoming and outgoing, for fire and ambulance service for the residents of Coutts and the surrounding area, as our volunteer fire department covers all of the outlying areas here. After the first couple of days, for about 5 days, traffic was intermittently allowed, single lane access at different times, north and south, few trucks at a time. Truckers who'd been blocked in were allowed to leave. On February 3rd, I visited Smuggler's Saloon and met with protesters, and that's not an active bar. It wasn't. I didn't go for a beer. Should add Smuggler's Saloon's a vacant business, which became the de facto headquarters for the Coutts protesters. The protest group appeared quite chaotic without clear leadership. The spokesperson told me the protesters did not have a clear plan and there was no clear leadership structure at that time. At one point, early the evening of February 3rd, 2022, Artur Petlowski, pastor from Calgary, came to Coutts and preached a sermon that strengthened the protesters' resolve. As a result, the lane of traffic is open for only a few hours, and after Mr. Pulaski's speech, tractors came in and blocked traffic again. That's tractors. On February 4th, I again attended Smugglers. While I was there, I met a lawyer who was advising the protesters. They thought they were legal because they were letting traffic through single lane. He advised them they were not legal protesters. I met with protesters a third time on February 5th when I went to Smugglers Saloon with Member of Parliament Glenn Motz and Lauren Bowie, the mayor of the village of Foremost, Alberta. I contracted COVID on the 8th and had no more in-person meetings. I was advised by protesters after the RCMP's raid on February 14th and the seizure of a firearms cache at a residence. They'd met at Smugglers Saloon, decided to bring the blockade to an end. There were rumors on their social media that the Emergencies Act would be invoked, and they were talking about losing businesses, losing the right to travel, and so on. I was in regular communication by phone and text message with Rajan Sani, the Minister of Transport at the time. Minister wanted to come to Coutts, but she told me the boss won't clear it. February 4th, I had a call with Premier Kinney. The conversation generally related to the pandemic response, the federal government's removal of vaccination exemptions for truckers, and how that seemed to be the tipping point for the protest initially. Most of my village's population is elderly. Many residents found it intimidating to have to go through the protest area to travel to Milk River to assess essential services. At times, however, residents had to drive off-road into the ditch to get around protesters. Several elderly residents were very frightened when they were forced to go through the protest area, or they simply stayed at home. One resident, a veteran of Afghanistan who suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder, had to leave town during the protests as it triggered her PTSD. During the first few days, a local school bus didn't run as the bus driver was unwilling to make the trip. Similarly, courier services were occasionally unable to cross the protest area. At least one local business which ships cattle was unable to operate during the blockade. The blockade greatly disrupted everyday life in Coutts. The village of Coutts has become more polarized as a result of the protest. Personal note, I received one death threat during the relevant time period related to the protest activity, received a few other threatening phone calls, and at one point found a truck parked outside of my home taking photos. Brought this to the RCMP's attention, and if it might take 30 seconds longer, I'm also the chair of a regional economic development initiative, and this cost us millions and millions of cross-border dollar traffic at that time. Anyway, that's kind of a whirlwind overview of what I saw in my 18 days of protest, and I thank you for the opportunity.
Merci, Monsieur Willett.
Thank you, Mr. Willett. Now let's move to the first round of questions. 5-minute questions. Mr. Brock.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good evening, and thank you to both mayors for your attendance today and your participation in this important study. I'd like to start off with you, Mayor Dilkens, and I'm going to start off with a statement that seems so obvious, but I think it bears repeating. As an elected official, as you are, as an elected official as I am, you represent the people who supported you and voted for you in the same fashion as those who did not. In your particular case, you represent all the citizens of your city, those who followed health measures, and those who protested against health measures. And while you may not personally agree with their positions, those who protested, nevertheless, you respected their minority opinions. You did not demonize those individuals. You did not stigmatize those individuals. You didn't call them names. You didn't call them racists, misogynists. And the type of language that any elected official should be saying to those who you don't agree with. Unlike our Prime Minister used that very divisive language. You stayed away specifically from that language, and you didn't pour fuel onto the flame. Would you agree with that statement?
Well, I would say that it was a very difficult situation, and you know, if I went back and reviewed 54 or 55 interviews that I conducted in the course of 6 days, you know, would there be language changes I would make? Probably, but the temperature was already hot on the ground. This was unlike, I've lived in Windsor my entire life.
But you didn't make it hotter.
I attempted to stay away, not to make it any hotter, and to try and find solutions to actually overcome a very difficult situation in Windsor.
Right, and notwithstanding, and you didn't mention this in your summary, notwithstanding the personal threats against you personally, perhaps your family, suspicious vehicles parked outside of your house, those were isolated incidents, and you didn't use that as a springboard, again, to demonize those who were protesting in your city, correct?
That's true.
Right. A gold standard on how to effectively coordinate all the partners responsible for the successful ending of this protest. You immediately knew about this event coming. You knew that the slow roll was happening in your city for a number of days. To your point, you picked up chatter on social media. You knew the temperature was rising. And the moment the blockade actually started, you, as an effective leader, reached out to the police chief or vice versa, and you coordinated a plan. You asked specifically, what do you need? She told you, without any hesitation, I need resources. You asked how many? She said 100. You immediately went into a political dialogue with all of your contacts. That probably includes the province, that includes the federal government. You've identified those individuals. I need not repeat that. But through that effective dialogue, you received assurances immediately that whatever Windsor needed, you would get. And in fact, within a few days, you didn't get 100 additional officers. You got 500 additional officers, correct?
That is correct.
Right. And furthermore, the Ministry of Transportation provided you with all the necessary infrastructure. I think they're called jersey markers or jersey pylons. Jersey barriers, 6 kilometers of jersey barriers immediately dispatched by the Ministry of Transportation, correct?
Yeah, that took a lot of effort because they didn't exist locally, and police, OPP, and others had made a determination that that was the appropriate response in order to get the roadway leading to the Ambassador Bridge open and to maintain security.
At the time I have, and I don't have a lot of time, but I will get a second round, I want to jump to the conclusion. The conclusion I want you to agree with me, hopefully, is that you, with your partners, with effective dialogue, with the police liaising directly with the protesters, not overtly increasing the temperature, you completely removed this protest without resource to anything within the Federal Emergencies Act, correct?
Le temps est écoulé.
Your time is up, Mr. Brock, but Mr. Wilkins might have a 5-second response.
The blockade was, the folks were removed before the Emergency Act was invoked, but something needed to be done to send a signal so that they didn't return, and that was the biggest fear that we had on our mind at the time, was a return.
Merci, Monsieur
They
Dilkens.
didn't.
Thank you, Mr. Dilkins. You're over by a minute, Mr. Brock. Sorry. Mr. Virani, 5 minutes. Mr. Virani, who's online, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to direct my questions to Mayor Dilkins. I'm going to read to you something, sir, that comes out of a document that was provided at the Justice Rouleau Commission by the Commission Council. It described what was happening in your area. The Ambassador Bridge point of entry is the busiest commercial land border crossing along the Canada-U.S. border and serves as a critical link for trade in automotive manufacturing, technology, other manufactured goods, and perishable goods. This point of entry handles over $390 million of trade per day, representing 26% of Canada's exports and 33% of its imports by road. Does that accurately characterize the economic value and significance of the Ambassador Bridge in your community?
Yeah, I think that's a fair characterization, and some would even say that the number is higher in terms of trade that crosses the bridge on a daily basis.
Okay, and when the blockades started to be erected, I believe companies started to reach out to your office directly and to the City of Windsor directly to explain the impact that the blockades would be having on their lines of business, and that included Stellantis officials reaching out to you directly. Is that correct?
Yeah, within the first 60 minutes of the border closing, Stellantis, which is our largest employer, makes the Chrysler minivan and Pacifica in Windsor. They reached out and said, what is going on at the Ambassador Bridge?
And those blockades, as they unfolded, ended up causing disruptions at various automotive manufacturers, including the cancellation of shifts and at various plants in and around the Windsor region. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And in minutes of meetings that were provided to the Rouleau Inquiry Commission, you actually described the economic impact as, quote, a national security situation. Is that right?
I called it a national economic, it was a threat to our national economic security.
Okay. And I believe the AMPA, the Automotive Parts Manufacturing Association, actually brought an injunction because the impact was so dramatic on the auto industry. And the City of Windsor actually joined that injunction as a party. Is that correct?
Yeah, we worked with the APMA and the CVMA to bring the injunction forward. They were the applicant. We were the intervener. And we knew that I couldn't control police operations. There were things happening that at the OPP and the RCMP, I didn't know precisely what was going on in terms of when people were going to arrive. I didn't have a clear line of sight on the plan. And I had people in my community who were saying, why aren't the police going in there and just removing these people? Why is this clicking day after day and the calendar page is turning day after day? People wanted some action, and the only positive action that I could take was trying to seek an injunction. And the APMA was a wonderful partner. The CVMA were wonderful partners because their members felt the economic impact most acutely.
Okay, and I just have a bit of limited time, so I'm just trying to try and cover a bit more ground here. So you mentioned in your opening statement the blockade is cleared by midnight of February 14th, but the threat was not over as of February 14th. I mean, your city itself declared a city state of emergency after the invocation of the Emergencies Act. Is that correct?
Correct.
And the media reported by February 15th, there was actually a secondary attempt to actually resurrect a blockade in and around the Ambassador Bridge. Is that accurate?
That is correct.
And in fact, what I understand about that injunction is that the justice who was involved in that injunction in the Superior Court, it turned a temporary injunction into a permanent injunction on February 18th in the wake of this ongoing threat. Is that accurate?
That's correct. The City of Windsor then moved to make the injunction permanent. We did that work. Our lawyers helped do that work. And Chief Justice Morowitz granted that application to make the injunction permanent.
And I understand that you said that even with the Emergencies Act invocation, you indicated in testimony at the Rouleau inquiry that you were concerned even after the situation was cleared in Ottawa that the protesters would come to Windsor to continue their activities. Was that your concern at the time?
Yeah, we had a very heightened state of alert in Windsor once the folks were moved out and vehicles were flown again. There was a heightened state of alert that there may be recidivism. Things may happen again, and you may have copycat issues popping up. And people coming, from other parts to lend their voice and their vehicle to another protest.
And with respect to that term recidivism, did the invocation of the Emergencies Act, from your perspective, help to curb some of that potential recidivism around the Ambassador Bridge?
I think it sent the strongest signal from the highest government in the land that this was a significant issue, and that it would there would basically be zero tolerance for any continuance of this type of behavior. I think it was helpful in terms of sending that signal to keep the Ambassador Bridge open. And the resources that were on the ground, even though the folks were moved out, we still had hundreds of additional people who remained in Windsor to maintain the safety and security of that corridor because of the economic importance of the Ambassador Bridge to our national economy. And I think the Emergencies Act was helpful in
Merci, Monsieur De.
Thank you, Mr. Dilkins. Unfortunately, your time is up, Mr. Varani. I'll ask Mr. Green to take the chair so I may speak to the witnesses myself. Mr. Green, you have the chair.
Oui. 5 minutes pour vous.
You have 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So let's continue, Mr. Dilkins, on this issue. You said that there was an injunction, and then further to that, the declaration of emergencies proclaimed by the City of Windsor, the Province of Ontario, and at the federal level as well. You were referring to the effect that had. I have a feeling that I somewhat interrupted you, and it's not my intention, but I have no choice in the matter. I'd like you to continue your answer, and I'd like to know, in your view, the injunction you received at the municipality versus the declaration of emergency from the Province of Ontario and versus the declaration of emergency at the federal level. What was the effect of each of these steps on the situation in your municipality?
I think they all worked in harmony together. And so to have all three levels of government step up and acknowledge the seriousness of the situation. The injunction, again, was really the only positive action that I thought we could take to send a signal. It had multiple purposes, but one was to send a signal to the public that we were taking this from a municipal level as seriously as we can and doing all that we can. And so when the province, after we moved and made the decision to move forward with the injunction process, the province then declared their state of emergency, which put significant people who were conducting this behavior, put them in significant jeopardy of losing perhaps their commercial vehicle operator registration, significant fines. There were all sorts of penalties. And then even though the folks had been moved out on February the 14th,
Oui, vous avez libéré, si je me souviens.
Actually, you cleared the Ambassador Bridge before the federal government proclaimed the situation of emergency. Am I correct in that or not?
I apologize, I missed the first part of your question.
J'ai dit.
I said you were able to clear the Ambassador Bridge before the declaration of emergency was issued by the federal government. Am I mistaken in that?
No, that is correct. The blockade was, the folks were moved out before the federal government invoked the Emergencies Act.
Merci. Maintenant, Monsieur Dilkin,
Thank you. Mr. Dilkins, I'd like you to tell us in about a minute's time about your relationship between the municipal authorities and the federal governments. Were you having regular contact with the federal authorities, and with whom specifically, if so?
The vast majority of my contact was with Minister Mendicino, and it was in the form of text messages and phone calls, and a lot of it was just status updates. You know, he was asking what's happening on the ground, and I would tell him what's happening on the ground and try and give him a line of sight of what I was seeing and what I was hearing and what it was like down here, so he could take the appropriate action that he thought necessary from his end, and I let him.
est-ce que vous avez demandé?
Did you ask Mr. Mendicino to see to the declaration of emergency, the Emergencies Act?
No, I did not.
Est-ce que vous avez?
Did you produce, I mean, I think you already produced a transcript of those exchanges you had with Mr. Mendicino before the commission. Can you give us a copy of that as well?
Absolutely.
Merci.
Thank you. If you'll allow me, I'll move to Mr. Willett. Similar questions, Mr. Willett. I'd like to know, in your region, what was done? At what point was your city cleared, or your village cleared of the protests?
The village was cleared on the 15th, early on the morning of the 15th of February. Actually, the protesters began to move out on the evening of the 14th.
Et
So, if I understand correctly, prior to the Emergencies Act being invoked, correct?
Yes.
dites-moi,
Tell me this. I think I have a minute left. The communications between your municipal authorities, in other words, you in this case, and the federal authorities, who were you speaking to and how frequently?
I never had any communication directly with federal authorities. It was all through the RCMP.
et à
And who were you speaking with at the RCMP?
Pardon me?
qui vous
Who were you speaking to at the RCMP?
Madame
I had a
Lucky,
direct
Ms. Lucky?
had a direct person to speak with who was a corporal, Corporal Curtis Peters. He gave me briefings every day. Also, the command center here contacted me with various people at different times. I don't have all the names.
Merci, Monsieur Willett.
Thank you, Mr. Willett. My time is up. So I will resume the chair and give Mr. Green the floor. You have 5 minutes.
Oui, c'est vrai, je m'excuse. Monsieur.
Yes, sorry. Mr. Massey, actually, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the committee and witnesses. To Mayor Dilkins, I've represented that area since 97 to 2002 as a city councilor from the Ambassador Bridge to the 401, which is 14 kilometers of mixed roadway, and then since 2002 to now as a member of parliament. Can you tell the committee how fragile and delicate that corridor, which receives upwards of 40,000 vehicles per day, is complex even without a blockade?
Yeah, well, I think it's fair to say, and it's a great question. It's fair to say that Huron Church Road is links the Ambassador Bridge at one end to the Herb Gray Parkway, or effectively the 401 on the other, and it's 3 kilometers from point to point. And so you have this municipal road with approximately 7 traffic lights, and it was, constructed almost 100 years ago. So it used to be farmland, and it's evolved over time. You have hotels, you have motels, you still have some homes whose driveways back onto or outlet onto Huron Church Road. You have a number of businesses, over 200 businesses and banks and shopping centers that require access. You have a school, Assumption High School. Was directly in the protest area and not accessible for the week of the protest. And Huron Church is also the primary access route for the vast majority of students accessing the University of Windsor. And so it is a crucial link for many in the city, and it has built up over time to be quite a trade corridor, more than just serving the trucks that access the Ambassador Bridge.
And on that corridor, in fact, where the protest was, or demonstration, whatever people want to call it, there's actually been students and parents killed, and it's actually a community safety zone along that corridor. But can you also outline how fragile the community is next to it? We've talked about the economic impact on the country, but also adjacent, when part of the city of Windsor, which is actually have some of the highest poverty in the region, was cut off from employment services, including children not being able to get to doctor's appointments.
Huron Church Road bisects the west side of the city, also known as, it's the original part of the city of Windsor called Sandwich Town, with sort of the oldest settlement west of Montreal. And so it is an area that is a student area, but also one that has a lower socioeconomic background. And so all of the transit services that serve that area were disrupted. Access to, like you say, Mr. Massey, physicians' offices, school access, all of that was disrupted. And it was a very, very difficult situation for people who lived on the west side of Huron Church Road, because they were effectively cut off from the other side, and that included grocery stores, or their only grocery store options.
How did you make you feel as a mayor, knowing that essential services were also compromised, and if the appropriate resources weren't put there, again, because this is a trade corridor for all of Canada, people were put at risk, whether fire, EMS, rescue services, and even just general policing? That must have been a stressful time.
Well, with the closure of Huron Church Road, we had to relocate a fire service, a fire and rescue operation to the other side of Huron Church, ambulance, relocated ambulance so they could be dispatched and actually reach folks who needed service on the other side of the road. So it certainly caused a number of issues from a municipal operations perspective, and also impacted a lot of people for the better part of a week.
Yeah, and you noted that $5.7 million has been the cost of the city of Windsor. I've seen the itinerary that was submitted to the ministers. We have not heard. Quite frankly, I feel betrayed. We have people that lost their job, their income during this time, did all the right things. Many people came to the protest. We know from media accounts outside the area. But meanwhile, if nothing changes, will it be municipal taxpayers that have to pick up the cost for this, especially given the fact that, they've lost out personally. They had loss of their own employment. There has been some minor compensation to businesses, and the Jersey barriers remain for weeks. And if we don't get support for this, then that's going to have to come from city taxpayers to protect the backbone for the nation.
I appreciate the fact that the federal government stepped up and provided some financial support to the businesses that were directly impacted along Huron Church Road. But you're correct in that the city of Windsor is carrying full freight, $5.7 million for the response that was provided, which included over $1 million for the Jersey barrier setup that no one in the city of Windsor asked for. I mean, it was the right response. It was an appropriate response, but it wasn't like I directed that or our police chief or anyone in the police service directed that. Others higher up were making those decisions, but the bill was handed to us. It's been paid, and because of that issue, we are now carrying a deficit of $5.7 million. So we hope to have a response to our request for consideration, because this was a very atypical municipal response to a situation that I still deem to be a national economic emergency.
Well, I also think this sends the wrong message to those that want to copycat or do that. We most recently just even had another convoy come into the city of Windsor, and we still don't have a plan on how to deal with this. And so the city has to continue to protect this, I guess, on their own goodwill until we actually see an official policy. Is that it? If this happened again in the upcoming weeks, that we would again have to be the ones to step up to the plate, or just let chaos reign and not deal with it until somebody else came in?
We would have to deal with any situation that came forward, and Windsor Police would respond accordingly, and hopefully we don't see that level of response required again.
Merci, monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Massé. Your time is up. Senator Boniface, 5 minutes.
And thank you to both witnesses for being here, and thank you for the work you do in your local communities. Mayor Dilkens, I'll start with you, and I'd like to understand the process that you went through to get the OPP assistance. Commissioner Creek was here, and I think you chair the Police Services Board as well, so I'm just trying to figure out which capacity you were in when you were having those discussions. But within the Act it says that a municipal chief who's of the opinion that emergency exists in the municipality may request the Commissioner of the OPP give assistance. And what we understood from Commissioner Creek's evidence, if I remember it correctly, is the request came from your office to the Premier and then on down. Is that am I accurate in that assumption?
Yes and no. There was more to it before it came from my office. And so in response to what we were seeing play out on the streets, my natural question to the police chief at the time was, what do you need to deal with this? And she said, I need more bodies. How many bodies do you need, chief? She came back, she says, I need 100. So I passed that information up the chain to the political folks that I was speaking with. And then a request came in the next day, or later that evening, saying, can you please put that request in writing? I told the chief that there's been a request to put it in writing. She drafted a letter. She and her office sent the letter to the Solicitor General of Ontario's office, and she and her office sent that letter also asking for 100 officers to, I believe, Minister Blair, and asking for RCMP support. And so what I did was, when I got a copy of those letters, I was CC'd on that email. When I got a copy of those letters, I then sent them directly to Minister Mendicino and Sylvia Jones as well, and I told the Premier of Ontario that the request was for 100 officers. And so the chief had made that request appropriately. I was just amplifying what the request was, because everyone was saying, what do you need? What do you need? And so we put it in writing at others' request, and then someone made a decision that 100 was not enough, that 500 was more appropriate, and they made the efforts to send those human resources to Windsor.
That's great. Thank you very much. I was listening earlier to a program, and the interviewee was with, I believe, the auto parts industry. But he was saying that the threat to the industry was such that if the border had remained closed, they would end up impacting auto plants, as far south as Tennessee. Can you relay any concerns that you heard from our American counterparts around the risk of not getting parts across the border to assist?
it's one of those situations that when you have lived in Windsor for a long time, you just fully understand the integration of the supply chains and how Windsor being the auto capital of Canada and Detroit being the auto capital of the U.S., all of those supply chains have built up on both sides of the border for a period of more than 100 years. And the auto industry deals in a just-in-time delivery world. And so when there is a closure, it takes no longer than 60 minutes for someone to say what's going on at the border because they see the backup in the plant. And so it is real. It is felt on both sides of the border, which I think speaks to the fact that you had the President of the United States reaching out to the Prime Minister and different ministers and secretaries communicating between the U.S. and Canadian governments saying, what do you need to clear this? Because it was having an impact not just on my local economy or my regional economy, but was having an impact in Ontario and having an impact across Canada.
The last time I remember that type of situation where it was backed up like that, I was in my former life, and it was 9/11. And so thank you for that. Mr. Willett, I'd just like to ask you if you could explain your understanding of given your experience with the border blockade, how it's changed after the RCMP operation, which found the cache of firearms, ammunition, and body armor. Can you just tell me how that came about and how that fit in the time frame?
Yeah, it happened shortly after midnight on the 14th of February. There was a raid on a local residence and a couple of RVs that were in her parking lot. And the people were arrested there along with the cache of firearms. The protesters, the main group, were like everybody else. They were taken, the impression that I got from speaking with them was that they were taken by surprise as well as the rest of us. And so they had a meeting that early the morning of the 14th. They started packing up at that time and saying, it's gone far from what we had intended, and we've attracted an element that we didn't intend to attract. And so during the 14th, yes.
Je m'excuse, votre temps était...
I apologize. Your time is up. I was letting the witness continue his answer, but I think it's a bit too long now. Senator Carignan, you have 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is for the Mayor of Windsor. Mayor, the bridge was cleared prior to the Emergency Measures Act in being invoked by the federal governments, but also prior to your own municipalities. Can you explain to us why you declared an emergency after the blockade was cleared? And what would have been the advantages of having this kind of declaration at the municipal level?
So, good question, Senator. The answer is that declaring a municipal emergency allows the head of council, in this case the mayor, to make decisions very, very quickly as things change. And it could be as simple as saying we need to redirect a bus route from point A to point B, which would normally have to go through a council process. We need to provide certain services that would require a budget and council approval that may not exist, and we may not have a council meeting scheduled for a week or 2 weeks. And so what happened, because of the unknown nature and the fear and the threat that existed after the blockade was cleared, there was a report that went to City Council, and in the recommendation, it recommended that these authorities be rolled up to the city manager, the CAO at the time, Jason Reynard, to be able to make those decisions. And there were some on City Council who felt uncomfortable allowing the CAO that authority. And so me declaring the state of emergency wrapped that authority up in the head of council, in the mayor, to be able to deal with anything that was required in the short term. And you'll see that I terminated that emergency within 10 days.
I understand. Perfect, I understand. Could you now tell me why you had tow trucks in Windsor I heard testimony according to which there were American tow trucks that came in, but I think I also saw some Windsor area companies that were tow truck operators. Can you explain to us what work you did in order to get access to these trucks, tow trucks?
So there's a lot of attention placed on the tow trucks, and I appreciate the question and an opportunity to explain. What happened was there was the thought that tow trucks were the limiting factor in the city of Windsor to be able to effect a response to have all of the traffic moved. Our friends at CBSA had made outreach saying that if anything were required to help get tow trucks from the United States, that they provided a contact saying, if we need to clear these folks to get the individuals and the tow trucks into Canada, here's the person to call. They will help effect that entry into Canada. The governor of Michigan, when asked a question about tow trucks, made a comment that she was prepared to send tow trucks over to Windsor to help deal with the situation. I had a conversation after the governor's comment to the media with her chief of staff, and in fact, the offer by the governor was really just to put us in contact with tow truck companies in Michigan who may have the resources. So I wasn't aware that any tow trucks actually were sent to the city of Windsor until we were preparing for the my November 7th appearance at the Rollo Commission, where our deputy police chief informed me that there were about 10 tow trucks that did come into Windsor from Detroit, were parked at a municipal park, but were never used in any way.
Okay.
Okay. If I were to focus on your success rate, I mean, you've been successful. You were successful in clearing the bridge without having the Emergencies Act in place, because that happened afterwards, without using the municipal level declarations of emergency. What were the factors of your success, supporting your success? Again, without the use of the Emergency Measures Act.
Canada.
At the federal level.
It's fair to say that everyone was just aligned trying to find a response, and so we didn't have really any amount of infighting or friction. Everyone was trying to work together to do what they needed to do and provide information and communicate with those they thought were appropriate to try and find a resolution to the issue. And so all of us understood. Everyone in Windsor, you don't have to tell people in Windsor what the importance of the Ambassador Bridge is. They just know it intuitively because it is the lifeline and puts so much bread on so many families' tables that they just know how important it is. And so they wanted to see a resolution. Everyone on City Council wanted to see a resolution. Everyone in City Administration wanted to see a resolution. The police were trying to work diligently to get the resources to effect a resolution. And when the OPP was sent to Windsor, the police worked very effectively in a joint incident command setup at our Emergency Operations Center to develop the plans, to get approval up the appropriate chains, to execute the plans, and it worked quite effectively.
Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Dilkens. Thank you, Senator Carignan. Your time is up. Senator Harder, you have 5 minutes.
Mr. President, thank you to our witnesses, and thank you for your leadership through this difficult period in your respective municipalities. Mayor Dilkens, I'd just like to comment and put on the record the comments made from at least one representative of the Michigan legislature who pointed to the disruption at the Ambassador Bridge and said, this is why we have to reshore to the United States the auto sector. How did that make you feel?
Well, I did see that, and I knew that the situation that was playing out provided the perfect opportunity to present that narrative. The part that isn't getting spoken about a lot that was crucial from our perspective was the work that was going on to secure the $5 billion investment between Stellantis and LG to build Canada's first electric vehicle battery manufacturing plant, which has been announced and is going to be built in Windsor. And so all of that work was going on quietly behind the scenes to put the pieces together. Leadership from Stellantis were watching this. We were in daily conversation with the representatives in Canada at Stellantis and LG. We knew what comments were being passed along. We knew that the president of Stellantis globally was in Ontario at the time, meeting with federal leaders and provincial leaders. And we knew that what was happening provided the perfect setup for someone to say, you know, this shows why operating in Canada may be disruptive. It may be safer for us to operate in the United States, which I think was an undertone to at least our municipal response, because we knew how important this investment was, of course, for Canada and Ontario, but we knew how important it was for our regional economy as well.
Mr. Mayor, James Bowder, the founder of, and one of the organizers of the so-called Freedom Convoy and the founder of an organization called Canada Unity, has announced today that he's going to organize a return celebration in February of next year. Have you heard whether or not this celebration will extend to the Ambassador Bridge? And if so, what would you do?
Well, I don't know that any of us would consider it a celebration, but it's worth noting that the legislation that's in place provincially is really important, and you'd have to be very, very committed to losing a lot to participate in this type of activity. In addition, the injunction still remains in effect. It is not going away. It still remains in effect. And so, you know, the Mr. Massey talked about this past weekend where there was 200 cars that came to Windsor and did a little parade through part of the Freedom Convoy, and they were directed very appropriately on which route they could take. But police have a zero tolerance approach for this, and I think that reflects the temperature in our community, that the community does not want to see this return and wants to see people dealt with very swiftly if they try and block the primary corridor that's putting a lot of bread on families' tables in the city of Windsor.
Thank you. Mayor Willits, with respect to Coots, are you aware of any so-called celebration? And how would your community react?
I'm not aware of it, other than I heard the same story that you did just now. My community, I guess, would react the same way that they did before. Some people would be out there celebrating with them, and I would not.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Missy.
Merci, monsieur.
Thank you, Senator Harder. Senator Patterson, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to the witnesses. First, Mayor Dilkens, you described the protest ending peacefully. I'm wondering if you could give us a little more detail. You were very involved with those events and with the authorities. How did it get resolved peacefully? How did that work in Windsor?
Police developed an operational plan that they began to implement on the Saturday, which is around the 13th. And they moved very systematically with their public order units and all of the equipment and the resources that they needed. They were able to move some folks on that particular day. But as it started getting darker, maybe 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, a local pastor from a local church that's been disagreeable from the beginning of the pandemic to any restrictions or vaccine or anything like that, put a call out to the congregation, and within 90 minutes to 2 hours, about 600 additional people showed up. Kids in strollers, young kids. It was almost unbelievable to watch, frankly. And so police made a very sensible decision to not continue. You imagine, however many police, 80 police or 90 police in a line from point to point, walking up the road, moving forward every 30 seconds or 60 seconds. And they made a decision that was appropriate, that they would wait for the kids to get hungry, to have to go to the bathroom, to want to go to sleep, because it was February, it was cold. And at some point, those kids would leave and they would conduct the operation the next day. So that's what they did. They moved in on the 14th very early and moved the rest of the folks out who were still there. And by that time, the kids had left.
Without resistance?
Yes, for the most part, I don't think there were no injuries that I'm aware of. And there were several arrests, I think upwards of 40 arrests that were made. But the issue was resolved and the roadway reopened.
And could I ask, Mayor Willett as well, if obviously you were also very involved in events near Coutts at the border. Could you describe how that blockade ended?
Yeah, just to carry on from what I said earlier, the will went away once the firearms were discovered. And you have to understand the situation here. The main protest was here in Coutts, but the RCMP had put a separate blockade up the highway about 12 kilometers, which kept us from getting a massive influx of protesters. So we had maybe 75 to 100 people here at that time, and they wisely made the decision to leave on their own accord.
Okay, thank you very much, both of you. Mayor Dilkens, I know you were very busy, engaged, but did you have time to observe the parallel situation going on in Ottawa?
Yes, sir.
Was there anything to learn from the situation in Ottawa, in your point of view?
I think it's fair to say that we did make some observations at the beginning of the blockade in Windsor, and those were observations from Ottawa with respect to folks who had brought in things like bouncy castles or hot tubs, some of the sort of ancillary things that made it look like it was a fun zone. And so police were very attentive to not allow that type of equipment to be brought in, and to make sure that the folks who were there were in their trucks. There were some, I think some were playing hockey in the street, but that type of equipment wasn't allowed to be brought in, and police really were attentive to that.
And pardon my ignorance, if I have one more question, Mr. Chair. Could you describe the Jersey barriers, please, for me, what they are? And I understand they were effective, and could you explain why, please?
Well, the Jersey barriers are probably maybe 30 feet long, and they're just concrete barriers, formed concrete barriers that you would see on any 400 series highway from time to time if they're doing construction. And it really just created a pipeline from the provincial highway to the foot of the Ambassador Bridge. There was no cross traffic allowed, so it entirely blocked the city, and folks who were bisected because of that road. The Jersey barriers really caused the bisection to be more amplified because there was no way around, there was no way through.
Merci, Monsieur Dilkens.
Thank you, Mr. Dilkens. Thank you, Senator. Your time is up. Thank you. So let's move to the second round of questions. 4 minutes. Mr. Motz, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Mayor Dilkens and Mayor Willett, for being here today. Just in the spirit of full disclosure, Mr. Willett is a constituent of mine. Coutts is in my riding, much like Mr. Massey is in Windsor, and I represent that area federally. Mr. Willett, I'm going to focus on you, if I could, in these questions. Now, the Coutts turned out to be one of the organizers. He assumed that role, Mr. Van Hugenbos. He told the Rouleau Commission that the message that you, as mayor, and I, as the Fed representative, were pushing was to clear the road sufficient to not break any laws, and you can protest all you want. Does that accurately describe the conversations that you may have had with him separate from me and the ones we had with him together?
Yeah, I had never had any separate discussions with him. But it is the message that I said from the beginning of the whole protest is you can protest, that you have that right in this country to protest all you want, just don't break the law. And that was my message all along.
Thank you. Now, during the Coutts protest, did you communicate with other protesters besides Mr. Van Hugenbos?
I did. I spoke with Alex Van Herk. I believe you're familiar with him. He was kind of the local spokesperson for a long time, and also a gentleman by the name of Jory, who was kind of I guess he was a media person internal to the protest. I never learned exactly how he fit in.
And then during those, as the leader of your community there, and they were in your community, during those communications with any of those protesters, did you call them racists?
No.
Did you call them misogynists?
No.
Did you threaten them in any way?
No.
So, why wouldn't you do that? You didn't agree with what they were doing. Why didn't you resort to that?
It's not the kind of person I am. I didn't get this old by being stupid. You don't get anywhere calling people names. That is the lowest that you can get as far as discourse when you're trying to accomplish something.
So based on that, and based on what those of us who were on the ground, off and on in different places throughout these protests, the comments that our Prime Minister made, did they help the situation in Coutts, or did they further inflame what you were trying to resolve?
Well, Mr. Motz, you know the feeling in this part of the world as far as the federal government and the Prime Minister goes. So anything that he had to say was, it's always taken in the way that everyone feels they're being attacked, or that the federal government is stepping on people. So that would have been the reaction.
Merci.
Yes, you're.
Merci, Monsieur Motz.
Thank you, Mr. Motz. Your time is up. 4 minutes, yes.
La parole est à
Mr. Nakfi, you have 4 minutes.
Mr. Chair, and I want to thank both the mayors for being here today. And Mayor Willett, I will start with you, and first thank you for your public service. Sir, as I was listening to your opening statements, the question that came to mind, were you during the protests were concerned about the safety and security of your community and yourself? You mentioned you received death threats, etc.
I wasn't so concerned about my safety. I mean, that's part of comes with the territory, I guess. I was concerned about the safety of the community. That's my main focus.
Yeah, I can understand that. You sent a text on February 12th to Mr. Gravenland, who is, I understand, is a CP reporter. And in that text, you stated, sir, and I'm quoting you, "Morning, Bill. The more things chance, the more they say the more they stay the same. You need to find someone in a protected position to call these guys what they are: domestic terrorists. Won't be me. They are right outside my window. I would be strung up literally. Just a thought." I mean, you're worried about your own safety in that text, but you called them domestic terrorists. What did you mean by that?
Well, as I said at the hearing, the POEC, I'm a Google lawyer, so that means I go to the internet and I look up the definition of domestic terrorism in Canada, as the government has set it forth. And when you're blocking and harming infrastructure and commerce, and that fits the definition.
So you're worried about that they were causing a harm to your community, to our country, and to our economy?
That's correct.
And sir, when on February 14th, RCMP got warrants and they searched those trucks and found those caches of weapons and other things that could be used for violent purposes. In light of what you said on February 12th in calling them domestic terrorists, how did you feel? Did you feel that your gut was right, that these people were dangerous?
Yeah, it's a discussion I had earlier with the jury that I spoke of with the protest group, that the fact that the longer that something like this goes on, the more that you attract an element that you don't want there. And so, in a sense, it surprised me. In a sense, it did not.
And once the protest was cleared up after, I believe it was February 15th, how concerned were you that it may come back in your community or on other surrounding ports of entries?
Well, concerned. I would not like to see it again. And I stated at one point that I hope that everybody learned how to deal with it if it were to happen again.
Do you think the Invocation of Emergencies Act created some buffer in ensuring that those protesters did not come back to your community or the surrounding communities?
I would say, from what I heard, it would, yes, because they were talking about it as they left.
It did provide for some deterrence on their part because of the...
Yeah, I believe so.
Thank you.
Monsieur Nagvi, votre temps est écoulé.
Mr. Vaclav, your time is up. Thank you. Mr. Green, can you take the chair?
3 minutes we got? 3 minutes pour tout?
3 minutes for you? Thank you, Mr. Green. My question's for Mr. Dilkens. I understand you asked for 100 extra police officers to put an end to the protests. You received 500. Do you know where they came from?
They came from multiple police agencies across Ontario. There were RCMP that were sent to Windsor as well. I don't know where their normal detachments are, but OPP obviously had a very large presence, but we had London Police, we had police from all sorts of different police services throughout the province.
Et est-ce que...
Can you tell me until what point did they stay with you? Did they stay in the region, these police officers?
After the folks were cleared out on February the 14th, there was a very large police presence that remained for several weeks thereafter. They started to dissipate over time, but I don't have direct knowledge of how many left every day, but you could see the presence diminish over a period of weeks.
Est-ce que vous avez déjà eu une demande?
Did you ever receive a request from the municipal police, the Ottawa police, the OPP, the RCMP to send those police officers to Ottawa, or your police officers to Ottawa?
Not at that particular time, but we did respond to a request to help support Ottawa, and Windsor Police did send officers to Ottawa subsequent to the clearing of the blockade in Windsor.
Vous souvenez-vous à quelle date?
Do you remember on what date?
I'm sorry, I do not.
Est-ce que c'était dans les...
Was it in the hours following February 14th, or was it weeks later?
It wasn't immediately thereafter, but it was within a couple of weeks, probably a week. There were officers sent.
Okay, so if I gather, your police officers did not go to Ottawa to free up Wellington Street.
I don't know what tasks they performed when they were in Ottawa, but it was to help support the overall effort.
Vous me dites qu'ils sont...
But you're saying they arrived here a few weeks later. From what I gather, then, it's not in the coming weeks or the coming days, the following days or the following weeks, and never. Actually, there was never a request from the RCMP or public safety. No one told you after you've cleared Ambassador Bridge. No one said to you, "Okay, now you should send them to Ottawa," or "We need 100 police officers or 500 police officers in Ottawa." No one ever said that to you.
No one said that to me, but the police chief made the decision to send officers to Ottawa, and I just don't know what date that decision was made.
Et ce n'était pas votre demande?
And it was not upon your request.
That's correct.
Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Dilkens. So I will resume the chair, and I will hand the floor over to Mr. Green. You have the floor. 3 minutes.
Mr. Massey, if we could.
OK. Alors, Monsieur
Mr. Massey, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Green. Mr. Dilkins, there were other costs associated with the disruption along Heron Church Road because it was inclement weather. Can you describe what those costs were with regards to the city to support the police officers and their safety there, as well as other people that were on the ground?
Well, I think all of the costs were wrapped up in the $5.7 million, and that was for overtime costs, for jersey barriers, for food, for lodging. You know, it really ran the gamut of expenses, including city expenses for overtime to deal with traffic control, signage, all of the things you would anticipate would be required from a municipal operation to help support a policing effort like the one that happened in Windsor.
And many of those expenses would be beyond your control because it would actually be performing under collective agreements and safety protocols. Can you submit your letter to the government and also the inventory sheet? Would you do that for the committee, please?
Happily, yes.
Okay, so I want to take a quick summary here to make sure I have this right. So it's $5.7 million. We have the feds that haven't paid anything. The Ontario government hasn't paid anything. The businesses have not paid anything. The illegal protesters have not paid anything. It's an area where people had high child poverty, unemployment, and people lost their jobs for a period of time, and also has a high immigrant population, couldn't get to services, including, as I mentioned, medical appointments. And now, at the end of the day, they paid, and we're expecting the City of Windsor residents alone to pay for all of this. How does that make you feel if there's going to be another situation? How do we go back to our community and explain for doing all the right things, especially from people outside this area, that we are continuing to have to do this without a plan? Does that seem fair?
Following the events in Windsor, I sent a letter to both the provincial and federal governments and asked for a sit-down planning session to talk about what we would do moving forward in the event something happened again. Because there's no doubt, you know, although people looked from the outside and said your response was really good in Windsor, it was over in about a week, you know, that was a good response for many. We probably could have shaved a day or two if we had a plan that, you know, was a little tighter. And if we spelled out who pays for what, it would make life a lot easier so you don't have the mayor from the little city of Windsor groveling over $5.7 million that was spent to help deal with a national economic emergency. And so we'd like to have that conversation because Huron Church Road is not going away. The Ambassador Bridge is not going away. And the possibility of something like this happening in the future, I cannot predict whether it will happen, and I have no practical way to stop it from happening right now. We need to have a coordinated response that deals with a very unique situation where you have a municipal road that adjoins a provincial highway leading to a federally regulated bridge, which happens to be under private ownership. But we have to figure out how to deal with this in a sensible way that you know, allows the proper response, the most effective and timely response, and figures out who pays for what. Because in situations like this, it's completely unfair for municipal taxpayers to fund the bill.
Merci, Monsieur Dilkins. Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Dilkins. Your 3 minutes are up now. We have a 3-minute round, or Senator Boniface, you have 3 minutes.
A couple of questions. Mr. Dilkins, was there any concern raised from your citizens about a counter-protest in the event that those weren't moved? Because that is always a great risk when you get a protest that's prolonged.
So that is a wonderful question because the temperature on the ground with the protesters was hot, but every day that went by, the temperature in the community got hot because we had just gone through this difficult pandemic period together where you had significant closures of our largest employer, of the parts sector as well, that affected many, like tens of thousands of families in the city. And so this was seen as something that was unnecessary. It was seen as a bit of an assault on the community because of the importance of the Ambassador Bridge. And there absolutely was the threat. There were Facebook groups set up asking for sort of the vigilante-style people who were interested in vigilante-style justice to sign up and express your support for the opposing side, those opposing the protesters. And so that did ramp up, and Windsor Police had to reach out to some in the community that were known community leaders to have them ratchet down the temperature that they were trying to raise up on behalf of some of the members in their union.
Thank you. Mr. Willett, I know you're in a smaller community, but did you have any experience in terms of that?
No, there was never any indication that anybody locally was going to counter protest other than gripe, but that's typical.
That's what you're there for, for them to call
That's
you.
right.
Mayor Dilkens, the concern really outside of, I don't want to call it vigilante because I think the real issue for people was they were being denied work. They knew that the plants would shut down if this didn't open up and such like. Is that part of the argument? And then I guess their second point would be for those affected in the high school and medical appointments stuff, they couldn't get their kids to school, couldn't get to where they needed to go for health reasons and others.
And I can't overstate the impact. I mean, it was large and it affected a lot of people. This wasn't just a couple hundred people that were impacted here. This would be tens of thousands of people that were impacted in their daily life, impacted in grocery shopping, impacted in taking transit to get to work, and every other facet of things that people in cities do each and every day. And it went on for a week. And the problem is I couldn't give them a line of sight on when it would be over. Police were developing their operational plans. It wouldn't have been appropriate even if I knew, but trying to respond to them to say we're on this, have comfort that the leaders are dealing with this, it was difficult to communicate with them in a way that provided clarity to them. So it looked like this could go on as long as the situation had gone on in Ottawa, and to this end.
Merci, Monsieur Dilkens.
Thank you, Mr. Dilkens. Thank you, Senator Boniface. Senator Harder, you have 3 minutes.
I'd like to follow up on the line of questioning from Mr. Massey. Mr. Willett, Mayor Willett, were there municipal expenses that have yet to be compensated, in your view, that Coutts incurred?
Actually, no. That's one of the advantages of the being this small. All of the policing is handled by the province, and we didn't incur any expenses.
This committee, the itemization of the 5.7, I think this is an item that the committee, when we come to writing our report, might wish to comment on. I am a resident of Ottawa, and I know that the city costs exceeded even Windsor's. And the resolution of those costs are an important piece of public confidence that emergency management is broadly shared across this country. Would you be prepared to do that?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Ça va, Monsieur?
You go, Senator Harder, yeah? You still had 2 minutes. Senator Carignan, Senator Harder had 2 minutes left. You can use those. Thank you. Let me get back to the $5.7 million bill. It's somewhat troubling. This is was sent on March 16th, 2022. You were proactive, and then you end up with a bill. It seems as though the federal government's not been prepared to, hasn't yet paid that off. Paid you back. And I'm concerned this might have an effect in other situations where people say, okay, well, let's not be proactive because then we're going to end up with the bill. Just look at Windsor. They were proactive. They ended up with this bill. They were never refunded for those costs. Did you receive any answers from the federal government? Can you explain those? And what would be your recommendations to prevent this recurring in the future? Is it like the creation of a fund or something that would lead to a change in the system to improve it so cities don't end up with these types of bills when they act in a proactive way, the way you did?
We've had no response from the federal government yet to our request for funding, but I think part of the solution here is to respond to the letter, which would bring all three levels of government together to find a pathway that says, if this happens again, here's how we collectively respond, here's who pays for what based on those responsibilities, and really helps expedite the response in a way that would minimize the disruption if this were to ever happen again.
Okay, merci.
Okay, thank you.
Merci, Senator.
Thank you, Senator Gagnon. Thank you, Mr. Dilkens. I'd like to thank the witnesses. our two witnesses, that is, Mr. Dilkens, Mr. Willett. And I will be suspending the meeting for our next panel to take its place. Thank you. Second panel. We have Mr. Brian Kingston from the Canadian Vehicle Manufacturers Association, President and Chief Executive Officer, as well as Jennifer Steeves, Director, Industry and Consumer Affairs, as well as Mr. Laskowski online. Sorry, I was looking at the wrong sheet. Mr. Laskowski, who is President of the Canadian Trucking Alliance, as well as Mr. Jeffrey Wood, Senior Vice President, Policy, also from the Canadian Trucking Alliance. So I'd like to welcome our four witnesses. Let's begin the first round of questions. Actually, no, I am mistaken. You each have 5 minutes for an opening statement. Let's start with Mr. Laskowski. 5 minutes, sir, for the Canadian Trucking Alliance. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and committee members. CTA is an alliance of 7 provincial trucking associations in Canada. Its board is made up of over 70 carriers of trucking executives ranging from small to very large companies. CTA's position on protest. Well before and throughout the events of 2022, CTA has made its position on protest targeting public road infrastructure known. CTA does not support and strongly disapproves of any protests on public highways, roadways, and bridges. CTA believes such actions, especially those that interfere with public safety, are not how disagreements with government policies should ever be expressed. Coming out of this committee, CTA would recommend that a national plan involving all provinces, federal and federal and all relevant enforcement agencies and international bridge crossings be formed to develop plans to protect our nation's critical trade infrastructure from potential future protests and/or ending them very quickly and peacefully. Blockades' impact on the trade community. Diesel blockades had a very detrimental impact on our members, their drivers, customers, businesses. Although most of our comments today are focused on the economic impact in the international trade community, let us never forget the impact of these events on the economic backbone of our nation's labor force, the commercial truck driver. The impact of these blockades on their physical and mental health was significant, as was the impact on their ability to make a living. As we're all aware, trade with the United States is critical to Canada's economic health. Over half of the $850 billion in total Canadian trade conducted with the United States on a custom basis in 2021 was moved by truck. Let's also remember that multiple crossings were impacted across Canada. This impacted and sent shockwaves through our entire trade community, which was noted recently by the Deputy Minister of Transport Canada, the Bank of Canada, and the Canadian Chamber of Commerce throughout the crisis. We also heard reaction from US politicians, including a Michigan Democrat who said, the one thing that couldn't be more clear is that we have to bring American manufacturing back home to states like Michigan. Even the White House press secretary mentioned President Biden's concerns with regards to what was happening in Canada. Very quickly, in BC, Pack Highway, nearly 2,000 trucks per day cross at Pack Highway. In February, year over, trade trucks fell by 6%. The Surrey Board of Trade said these ongoing protests are really sabotaging our economy, sabotaging our infrastructure, and sabotaging the livelihoods of businesses, jobs, and families. In Alberta, it lasted for almost 2 weeks, the blockades. 800 trucks a day cross at Coutts. Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland has stated $48 million in trade was lost each day of those blockades. Manitoba, 1,100 trucks a day cross at Emerson. The Deputy Prime Minister has estimated that it was a $73 million a day trade impact at Emerson. The Ambassador Bridge, which I'll leave to the folks at the Auto Manufacturers Association, was obviously impacted. Truck traffic fell by almost 27% year over in February because of these blockades. 7,000 trucks a day crossed at that bridge. The Blue Water Bridge, pop-up protests those very same days. As the trucking industry switched to the Blue Water Bridge because of the Ambassador shutdown, so did the protesters. As they did with the Peace Bridge, pop-up protests there, 2,600 a day cost there. In Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, both those provinces had to issue mandates about public highway protesting. CTA strongly believes that all bridge crossings and authorities, provinces, and federal agencies, enforcement agencies did their best throughout the crisis to end these blockades as quickly as possible in a peaceful manner. The Commission is currently looking into whether the government's invocation of the Emergency Act was appropriate under the circumstances. We have all heard testimony from several witnesses who are in favor and some against the government's decision. I and the CTA are not national security experts. That said, within days of the Emergency Act being invoked, the protests stopped, the pop-up blockades stopped, bridges reopened, and trade restarted, and our nation's commercial truck drivers' lives were returned to them. For the record, when invoked, CPA supported the use of the Emergency Act. As from our perspective, the invocation of the Emergency Act achieved the objective we were looking for, a quick and peaceful conclusion to the blockades and an ending of the pop-up protests on highways and bridges. There may be some disagreement as to whether the act is meant for situations and circumstances as the one we found ourselves in this past winter. Again, I am not a national security expert, but from where I sit, if people are uncomfortable with invoking the Emergency Act for situations like this, then we need to work together to find a substitute that is just as quick, powerful, and effective. My last closing comment is to reiterate what I said in my opening point. To repeat a previous comment, CTA would recommend that a national plan involve all provinces, the federal government, and relevant enforcement agencies reflecting various international crossing structural and authority oversight be developed to develop a plan to protect our nation's critical trade infrastructure from potential future protests and or ending them very quickly and peacefully. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Merci, Monsieur Larofsky.
Thank you, Mr. Laskowski. Mr. Kingston, you have 5 minutes for your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Joint Chairs, honorable members, thanks for the invitation to appear here today as part of your study. The Canadian Vehicle Manufacturers Association, CVMA, is the industry association that represents Canada's leading manufacturers of light and heavy-duty motor vehicles. Our membership includes Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis, also known as FCA Canada. The auto industry is responsible for approximately $13 billion in annual economic activity, 117,000 direct jobs, and an additional 371,000 jobs in the aftermarket services and dealership networks. The industry is our second largest export sector with $36.5 billion in exports in 2021. The auto industry is highly integrated with the U.S. through both supply chain relationships and the shipment of final vehicles. Parts may cross the Canada-U.S. border 7 to 9 times in advance of installation in a vehicle, and over 90% of Canadian-built vehicles are exported, the overwhelming majority, of course, going to the United States. Auto production relies on efficient supply chain logistics for the shipment of parts, components, and vehicles. Assembly facilities depend on regular and predictable deliveries of parts to operate at full capacity. Any delay or disruption to the supply chain, even very minor, can have an immediate effect on production and trade. Given the integration of the industry with the U.S., the efficient movement of goods across the border every single day is particularly important. The Ambassador Bridge plays a key role in the industry as Canada's most important border crossing. It's responsible for approximately 25% of Canada's annual goods trade, and with 5 OEMs assembling vehicles in Ontario, the bridge is a key conduit for motor vehicles and parts. The February blockade at the Ambassador Bridge exposed weaknesses in Canada's border management practices and trade infrastructure that need to be addressed to make the supply chain more resilient. There is additional complexity with this particular trade corridor, as the Customs Plaza is under federal jurisdiction, the 401 is under provincial jurisdiction, and the road leading into the plaza is municipal. It took significant time to identify each respective government lead and to coordinate, share information, and determine what capabilities were required to resolve the trade blockage. In an effort to accelerate this process, the CVMA filed an affidavit in support of the auto parts manufacturer injunction against the protesters on February 10th. While our members greatly appreciated all the efforts of every level of government who worked to find solutions to mitigate the impact, the blockade did result in automotive companies on both sides of the border undertaking extraordinary measures at great cost to divert trade to other border crossings. These other crossings simply do not have the capacity to handle higher trade volumes without significant disruption to supply schedules, which of course we witnessed. This meant that auto plants were forced to cease production, and this affected thousands of people employed in the industry, not just in Canada, but also in the United States. The blockade of the bridge came at an already challenging time for the industry due to fragile supply chains, under pressure from pandemic-related shortages and backlogs, and in fact, North American vehicle production has still not returned to pre-pandemic levels. This incident, combined with other recent port and railway disruptions, has undermined Canada's reputation as a reliable jurisdiction for the production and movement of goods. We must learn from these events to ensure that Canada has plans in place to quickly respond to future disruptions. Failing to address these weaknesses could impact our competitiveness for not just existing auto manufacturing, but future auto investment. We should establish processes for quick and efficient coordination and communication between industry, multiple levels of government, and other appropriate stakeholders to mitigate future disruptions to the supply chain. We recommend the following: identify a clear federal lead to provide guidance and direction when there is any threat to the uninterrupted movement of commercial goods. This lead should have the ability to coordinate with other levels of government and counterparts in the United States to ensure that decisions are made quickly and disruptions are dealt with swiftly, with updates communicated regularly to industry. And second, enhance the legislative tools to address future blockades or disruptions, such as the Keeping Ontario Open for Business Act that established prohibitions and enforcement mechanisms to prevent persons from impeding access to, egress from, or the ordinary use of protected infrastructure. The federal government should consider broader powers to quickly deal with blockades, which would preclude the necessity of invoking the Emergencies Act. With that, thank you. Appreciate your time and look forward to any questions.
Merci, Monsieur Kingston.
Thank you, Mr. Kingston. I'd ask you to perhaps speak a little more slowly when you answer our questions, because it is a bit quick for the interpretation. So let's start with the first round of questions, a 5-minute round. The first round is from Mr. Brock. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to your thank you to the witnesses for your participation and attendance tonight. To you, Mr. Laskowski, I listened very carefully to your opening statement. What I didn't hear is the reasons and the rationale why members of your alliance were protesting in the first place. You're well aware of that because you were advocating for that as early as January the 5th, 2022. Fair to say?
Are you stating that CTA was advocating these supporting the protests?
Not saying that at all. I'm saying you understand the rationale behind why these people were protesting. You had several unvaccinated truck drivers who you were supporting as early as January the 5th, 2021.
Sorry,
don't 2022.
Understand. I do not understand what you mean by supporting.
Okay, well, you
drivers.
issued a statement that I'm looking at right now, January 5, 2022, which was really on the eve of the government making an announcement, Canadian government and U.S. government making announcements that as of January the 15th and January the 22nd, respectively, that only fully vaccinated Canadians and Americans can travel back and forth. You were aware of those dates?
Correct.
And that the CTA requested both governments to meet and consult with key members of the supply chain to determine a more suitable date for enforcement that would be less disruptive to the supply chain, which was already struggling to function at normal capacity. You agree with that?
Correct.
And at that point, neither government gave you any indication that they would reconsider enforcing the mandates that month and not provided any details to you, correct?
Correct.
You indicated further that there was a modest uptick of drivers getting vaccinated at some companies, but there was a higher than normal turnover and others declaring their intention to leave the industry or seek employment in the provincially regulated sector over the impending mandate at the border, correct?
Correct.
You anticipated the industry was going to lose 12,000 to 16,000 cross-border commercial drivers if the mandate took effect that month, correct?
Correct.
And you quoted as many as 30,000 Canadian federally regulated drivers exiting the supply chain, correct?
Correct.
The CTA continues to caution the Government of Canada that implementing a domestic mandate on federally regulated carriers and their employees would further exacerbate the driver shortage, the disruption to the supply chain, and the rising costs on consumers. You stand by that statement?
We do.
That the CTA and your member companies have worked closely with the Government of Canada throughout the COVID pandemic to prevent the spread of the disease throughout the supply chain, and this cooperative relationship has helped make the industry safer, correct?
Correct.
That you strongly believe that the health benefits of vaccines are unquestionable, but that did not change the fact that any substantial reduction of commercial drivers when there's already an acute shortage would further disrupt a very fragile supply chain and the economy, correct?
Correct.
Simply put, the supply chain desperately needs more drivers, not less drivers, to deliver goods and products that we as consumers on both sides of the border depend on, correct?
Correct.
And therefore, the CTA was again calling on the Government of Canada to maintain the position it agreed upon in the summer of 2021 of exempting the trucking industry as an essential service due to the potential consequences to the economy. You maintained that position, didn't you, sir?
Yes, I did.
And at a minimum, Ottawa, thank you, at a minimum, Ottawa must exempt commercial truck drivers, mechanics, and those who work outdoors from the domestic mandate. You agree with that?
Yes.
Thank you. Those are my questions.
Merci. Merci, Monsieur Brock.
Thank you, Mr. Rock. Mr. Virani, you have 5 minutes.
Go first, Mr. Chair. I believe it's Mr. Naqvi that will go first.
Moi, j'avais Monsieur Virani.
I had Mr. Virani on the list, but it's up to you, really.
Qui veut commencer?
Who wants to start?
Naqvi. Alors, Monsieur, ça va être...
Mr. Naqvi, then.
Thank you. So, Mr. Laskowski, I'll start with you, and I'll follow up on the questions that Mr. Brock was posing to you. Of course, the mandate of the Canadian Truckers Alliance is to ensure that we have a vibrant trucking industry in Canada. Am I correct?
It's vibrant and safe trucking industry.
And part of the work that the Alliance does is to ensure that the trucking sector complies with the laws, the rules, and regulations so that we can continue to have a safe supply chain and safe routes between the two countries. Am I correct?
Absolutely.
And is it my understanding that you work very closely with all relevant government departments federally and provincially and perhaps even at the municipal level to ensure that rules are being discussed and are fully complied by your members of Trucking Alliance?
Absolutely, including the COVID vaccinations.
Including the COVID vaccination, and how would you describe the level of engagement that you had with different levels of government during the pandemic?
I would say we had an excellent cooperative relationship, lots of dialogue to work through a lot of complex issues.
And would you also agree that that your members, trucking companies and truckers themselves, are law-abiding and they comply with the rules that are set for them so that they can do their good work?
Absolutely, and including the vaccination rates. Our industry was no different than the general population in Canada, including our nation's truck drivers.
So, sir, what would that be? What vaccination rate are we talking about among truckers?
When we were looking at those vaccination rates at the time, we got close up to about 85%. It depended on your region, right? But 85 to 90%. And hence, to the previous questions, when CTA estimated the loss, we were correct. It was over 10%, which is over 10,000 people left the cross-border industry. That was through choice.
Yeah, but 85 to 90%, I mean, that's really in line with what Canadians across the country were doing. That's remarkable. Congratulations.
Absolutely.
And so, sir, can you share with your concerns then when you saw blockades and occupations happening in cities like Ottawa and across the borders, across the country, and people sort of suggesting that they're truckers and they're taking matters in your hand? What, as an alliance, were your thoughts and your engagement and activity during that process?
Well, we made several statements throughout the crisis against public protests on public highways, as I noted in my open remarks. They're available up on our website, and I could read them all into the record, but I'm sure you want to ask me more questions as opposed to me reading you back my statements.
Well, let me pose a statement that I believe CTA issued on January the 29th, which said, while a number of Canadians are in Ottawa to voice their displeasure with this mandate, it also appears that a great number of these protesters have no connection to the trucking industry and have a separate agenda beyond a disagreement over cross-border vaccine requirements. As these protests unfold over the weekend, we ask the Canadian public to be aware that many of the people you see and hear in media reports do not have a connection to the trucking industry. Do you still stand by that statement of January 29th?
Absolutely.
And what was the concern that you were facing as an alliance, and what were you hearing from truckers, those 90% of truckers who had vaccinated themselves and wanted to continue working?
Well, I think that, it was a complex issue, still is a complex issue in our industry and in society. And the vast majority of truck drivers were vaccinated, and the vast majority of truck drivers were out doing what they love to do, and that's moving our nation's economy.
What was the impact of those blockades on truckers who were vaccinated and was able to legally cross the border to the U.S. and come back?
Well, if you're stuck behind a blockade, you're stuck behind a blockade. And as we noted, some of those blockades lasted days and weeks. So that's food, that's water, that's restroom, all the necessities of life, some running without their medication, and obviously being impacted on their livelihood as the truck sat. So high level of frustration and a high level of impact on the vast majority of truck drivers who are out there, as I mentioned before, moving our nation's economy.
Have you
Merci, Monsieur Naqvi.
Thank you, Mr. Naqvi. Your time is up. Thank you, Mr. Oskowski. Mr. Green, can I ask you to take the chair again? Thank you, Mr. Green. Mr. Laskowski, I have a few questions for you. I'd be interested to know this. Were you consulted within your association prior to the invoking of the Emergency Measures Act with the regulations and decrees that followed?
We were in constant contact with, I think, just so you understand how the alliance work, it's a provincial associations across Canada belong to it. So my counterparts throughout Canada were in constant who were impacted by these blockades at the borders I mentioned, were in constant contact with their various levels of government, as was I.
Avec qui précisément?
Who were you speaking to directly at the federal government? Who was your contact there?
Well, my private conversations are my private conversations, but we were in constant contact with a number of officials and the relevant officials at all levels of government.
Avec qui, Monsieur
With whom, Mr. Laskowski?
As I said, those are private conversations, sir.
C'est pas privé, mais
It's not private, sir.
Intervene for 1 second as the chair. I just want to procedurally remind Mr. Laskowski where he is. He's at a committee reviewing the Emergency Act in the House of Commons. We do, sir, have the ability to send for documents either through informal ways or formal ways, and I would just ask that you consider cooperating with the questions at hand. Certainly, it's not going to put you in any kind of legal issues to be forthcoming in your answers. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Alors, je vous repose la question.
So I'll ask you once again, Mr. Laskowski, who were you communicating with within the federal government?
CBSA, Health Canada, Transport Canada. That would be the most relevant agencies, I would say.
Mais qui?
But whom specifically within these agencies?
The officials responsible for border crossings and dealing with public health.
Est-ce que vous pouvez nous donner les noms?
Could you provide the names of these individuals, please?
All right, well, what names would you like, sir?
The one you know.
With a lot of,
le nom des gens.
The names of the people you spoke with.
I deal with multiple people at Transport Canada, at CBSA, and at Health Canada. I'd have to look through all my Rolodex to go through them all. Would you like them all?
Oui, s'il vous.
Yes, please. If you could send those to us. The other question, did you speak with someone within the Department of Public Safety?
Yes.
Qui précise?
Who specifically?
Well, it would be directly with those responsible at CBSA for cross-border
Mais des
safety.
noms, monsieur.
But some names, Mr. Laskowski.
Again, I'd have to go through my Rolodex and get you all these names.
Est-ce que c'était avec des...
Was it with officials or representatives from the minister's office or other officials, public servants?
CTA deals with individuals both at the bureaucratic level and at the political level.
Et est-ce que vous...
Do you often deal with these people? Because now you're not even able to name one of them.
Well, exactly, sir. I don't understand, what it is that you want with names. Like what?
Je veux le nom des...
I want the names of the people you spoke to within the office of the Minister of Public Safety.
Sure. Well, I can't remember all the names off the top of my head at this
Not
time.
all of them, un nom.
One name.
So please bring the questions back through the chair just for the purpose of making sure our guests have the ability to respond.
Donc, monsieur...
Mr. Laskowski, I understand you're not in a position to name, not even one name of a person within the office of the department, the Minister for Public Safety.
C'est exact?
Is that correct?
Sir, I do not see why names are relevant.
Ça, ce n'est pas...
That is not your responsibility, sir. The reason as to why I'm asking the question is up to me. Your job here is to answer the questions. That's why you're here today. Am I mistaken? You didn't think you'd have to answer questions here?
I've done these meetings for almost 30 years, sir. No one has ever asked me the name of someone.
For the first time, you're here before this joint committee, the House of Commons and the Senate. on emergency measures from last February. Don't tell me that this is the first time you've been doing this for 30 years. You were advised that you'd have to answer questions, correct?
Correct, and this is the first time in 30
Vous
years.
êtes-vous préparé?
Were you prepared to actually answer questions?
I am answering your question, sir.
OK, mais je pense.
Okay, I think we're wasting time. From what I gather, did you see the regulations regarding transport before the passage of the Emergency Measures Act?
No, I did not.
Avez-vous
Did you speak to someone within the Public Safety Minister's office as to those regulations?
No, I did not.
de quoi vous parliez?
What were you discussing with people within the Minister of Public Safety's office?
With regards to the pandemic?
Oui.
Yes.
What I was discussing at the time was the application of multiple, if you go through our website, changes that involved COVID protocols. There were weekly conversations, sometimes daily conversations about how truck drivers and loads cross the border, sir.
At this time, before I hand the chair over, I just do want to take a chair's prerogative, Mr. Lukowski. I know that this could feel perhaps a little bit adversarial. It doesn't have to be. But I do want to remind you, sir, that this is not like any other committee that you've attended here in the House of Commons. This is dealing with the Emergency Act, which is a significant thing in terms of its precedence and the impact and the national import and security. So I would ask, sir, that when you finish this meeting, you consider working with your administration to provide the answers to the questions that were put to you. The names are germane. They might not be to you, sir, but to this committee they are. And I would just ask your cooperation in providing in the fullness of detail, notwithstanding the fact that you probably don't recall them offhand tonight, but you can submit them through the clerks. But I do want to just, again, emphasize the importance of this committee and the nature in which your candor and honesty is required.
I've given you my candor and my honesty, Mr. Chair, and be happy to cooperate. If you give me specific topics and who I spoke to, be happy to answer that.
Okay. Well, at this point, I will hand the chair back over and I'll proceed with my round.
Merci. Alors, Monsieur.
Thank you. Mr. Green, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Lukowski. I'm going to go a little bit slower for the purpose of the meeting, and I want to get a sense out of your total membership. How many drivers on the road, coast to coast to coast, does the Alliance represent?
So we represent over 5,000 trucking companies across Canada.
And if you were to do an estimate, how many drivers would that potentially encompass?
Oh, well, it's 5,000 companies. You know, I've got my senior VP, Jeff. What would you say on average we would have about estimate in terms of drivers in that membership?
Between 100 and, let's say, 100,000, 120,000.
So 85 to 95,000 vaccinated, still working day in and day out during the crisis this country was in throughout COVID, delivering goods and services to Canadians across the country, and 5 to 10,000 who, through personal choice, decided not to get vaccinated, just by round numbers. Is that about right, Mr. Wood?
Yep, that's correct.
Yep. Okay, perfect. So, Mr. Lukowski, in your opinion, I don't know if you got anecdotal feedback on this, but I'm trying to get a sense from you, sir. You alluded to this, and in questioning for Mr. Nukvi, alluded to how this movement that was supposed to be about truckers got co-opted by people way outside of the industry. Clearly, I mean, overwhelmingly not in support of the actual sector, the 95,000 people who did the right thing and kept working. So in your opinion, did you get any feedback around how many active members, actual truckers represented within the Alliance were actively involved in these blockades and convoys? Did they make themselves known to your association in any way, shape, or form?
No, they didn't. But, you know, as I stated before and in a public way, very few people that were associated with these things. And you could see by the types of vehicles that were at the blockades were associated with our industry.
That's right. I'm, you know, we're going to probably spend quite some time unpacking what happened and hopefully responding to some of the recommendations that you all put forward in terms of ensuring that the proper consultation happens across all levels of government so that this doesn't happen again. And I think you were quite right in your assessment that even if it isn't an Emergency Act response, there needs to be something with higher specificity around our borders and infrastructures that might protect it from these types of processes. You had mentioned you had spoken to different levels of government. I think there was some confusion with you and perhaps the previous speaker, my colleague, Mr. Fortin. I'm going to ask you specifically, sir, what role did your alliance have in communicating with your provincial counterparts in the Ministry of Transport for Ontario?
So we deal with all levels of government, including Ontario, our members out in British Columbia and Alberta.
When you were in those discussions with specificity, was there ever any conversation around the Ministry of Transport perhaps targeting either the suspension of licenses or insurance to perhaps motivate licensed and regulated truckers to cease and desist these illegal activities? Did they consult with you around those conversations? Is it something perhaps that you brought up in any of your conversations?
So the issue of how to move people away from borders was focused primarily on the federal government, as the trucks were, or the vehicles per se, were at the federal government. So our conversations with regards to dealing with how to remove vehicles from the roads or protesters from the road involved multiple agencies, including MTO. For example, at the Peace Bridge, we had public people on public highways running up and down the roads.
So I'll ask you with a greater specificity, is it your opinion that if at any of those levels of government, if the Ministry of Transport had perhaps stated that if people do not move, that either their insurance or their license may be revoked? And the reason why we're putting these questions to you, sir, is because it's our duty, it's our mandate as a committee, and you may or may not know our mandate, is to see if it met the threshold, to see if we exhausted all other possibilities. And so we're turning to subject matter experts like yourself to try to figure out if those consultations happen. So is it your opinion that if that possible avenue was used, we might have averted it?
The Canadian Trucking Alliance didn't bring those things forward to any level of government.
With the briefest way possible, in your estimation, what was the cost to your alliance members, the 95% who continue to want to work and continue to move goods and services? What was the material economic cost of the impact and the disruption of the conference?
Rapidement, M. Laskowski, le temps est écoulé.
Quickly, Mr. Laskowski, the time is almost up.
Do you want me to answer that question, or?
Oui, je dis rapidement, s'il vous plaît.
Yes, quickly, please.
So I mentioned in the earlier comments, it was a general economic loss. You're probably looking at $100 an hour, if not more, for running a tractor trailer. So just think about all those trucks sitting in those queues, missing loads and just sitting there. So the economic loss on our industry was significant. There isn't an exact number.
Thank you, Mr. Laskowski. Senator Boniface, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for being here. And to the Canadian Trucking Alliance, let me first say thank you to all those truckers out there that kept things going through the pandemic under tough circumstances, and so we're deeply grateful to them who kept our food chain and everything else going. The emergency measures regulation included truck depots and the definition of critical infrastructure, meaning that it was forbidden to interfere with the functioning of truck depots during the time when that regulation was in effect. Can you give me just to what extent were truck depots subjected to interference during the protests and the blockades? Do you have any information on that?
I'm sorry. What's your definition of a truck depot? Like a rest area, miss?
Well, I'm complimented. I'm using the definition found within the regulation, so I was actually hoping you would help me understand a truck depot.
Do you know what the definition of truck depot is here, Jeff?
I do not, Stephen. I have my own definition, but I do not know the one that we're speaking about.
I
If
would,
you could,
I
if
would
you could
welcome the
repeat the
definition.
Yeah, if you could repeat the question, I might be able to answer it, but I just want to make sure that what I'm answering is actually the correct reference.
So in the regulation that came as a result of the act being put into place, truck depots were included in critical infrastructure. So I was just trying to get a sense of definition on what you would say, what you think that it was intention.
I'm purely guessing here. It's either a truck rest area or perhaps the truck terminals. But that is I am guessing here.
Okay, that was the distinction I was trying to clarify, but that's okay. And maybe to both organizations, I'll start with the CTA and then I'll come to our guests who are present. Have you done a review it in regard to how it took place, what you may or may not, or you may have been able to do differently, or anything that you can assist us with in that regard?
Sure, and I think that's where we made our recommendation that, and I think you heard it from the Canadian Vehicle Manufacturers Association, that, really I think that if every crossing is different, and it involves different, the Vehicle Manufacturers Association brought up there's municipalities, provinces, federal government, there can be different enforcement agencies involved. I think one of the lessons, and I think it was inferred to by the Vehicle Manufacturers Association, was that if you get everybody in the room together to say, okay, what is the lessons we learned here? How could we be more proactive to end it quickly and peacefully? We want it to end peacefully and we want it to end quickly. What is it? What is the plan? And how could we work for better the next time in terms of having a plan? In essence, who does what and when?
Okay, thank you. And I'll ask the Vehicle Manufacturers Association the same question.
Thank you. Yes, we did undertake a review, and we have provided written advice into the Public Safety Minister after this occurred with some recommendations to ensure that it doesn't happen again. And they're in line with what I've mentioned here today, identifying a clear lead at these key pieces of infrastructure and ensuring that we have legislative tools to avoid the need for this type of act in the future if there is a disruption at a critical border crossing.
And you realize that, well, you would definitely realize that in your former roles, but the levels of government you would have to be required to be involved in that is an onerous task. So if you look at it from Ontario's perspective, the Ontario government moved with some legislation of their own. Would you, when you look at that legislation, was that helpful to you, and did you have input into that?
The legislation was helpful. We didn't have direct input into it in the sense that we weren't providing specific advice on tools that were necessary. What we were doing is communicating with all three levels of government on the economic harm that was occurring and really just asking for a solution to remove the blockade.
And if you look at the report today that says that there may be a return to these events in February, I would think that you would want to move with some
Votre temps est écoulé, Madame la Sénatrice.
Your time is up, Senator.
Désolé. La parole serait au sénateur.
Senator Carignan would have the floor, but I don't think he's online anymore. No. Okay. Senator Harder, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to our witnesses. Mr. Kingston, I was thinking that you were the Maytag repairman there for a while. Let me start with you, but I'm going to ask the same question to Mr. Laskowski as well. In his testimony, Mr. Laskowski referred to the concern that they had with Guacamo in the sense of moving from Coots, you close Coots and they go somewhere else, or one bridge to Blue Water or the like. I think it would be very helpful for us to understand better the risks involved beyond the Coots and the Ambassador Bridge for your industry, and the need and how the Emergencies Act invocation gave some assurance as to the stability of the routes that were used?
Thank you, Senator. Oh, sorry. So yeah, what we witnessed instantly once the blockade occurred, and automakers are best in class when it comes to operating an efficient supply chain. So they have multiple plans in place to divert the trade to get it to the plant. So immediately trucks were diverted to bridges like the Blue Water Bridge. But the challenge that we saw there is that they don't have the CBSA infrastructure to accommodate high volumes of trucks. And as we heard earlier, Ambassador Bridge can see 8,000 trucks a day. So what then occurred was we had lineups, and then truck drivers were timing out, meaning they could no longer be on the road. So although there were diversions occurring, it wasn't a perfect solution. And in some instances, automakers had to take extremely extraordinary measures to get parts to plants. So there were ways to divert around, but nothing has the capacity that you would have at the Ambassador Bridge, which is why it's such a critical piece of infrastructure.
Thank you. Mr. Lukowski, how would you respond to the same question with respect to your industry and the concerns that you earlier described?
So it was very frustrating. The blockades themselves were obviously frustrating, but equally frustrating to not know. For example, at the Ambassador Bridge, carriers started to divert over to the Blue Water Bridge. Well, the protesters adapted. And, although it wasn't huge numbers that went over there, it was enough on public highways to stop the trucks and stop trade. The same thing happened at the Peace Bridge, and you'd seen it throughout Canada, and even at Pack Highway in British Columbia, where you would have people just running onto the roads. So the impact was significant. It had, although they weren't as fortified as those at Coutts, Emerson, and at the Ambassador, it was disruptive. And at the time, hindsight's always a benefit, but at the time you wondered what's next. When is it going to happen again? It was erratic and couldn't be predicted.
And could I just ask a follow-up question? Once the Emergency Act was invoked, were you and your truck association relieved that there was now greater predictability in the supply chain routes? In other words, it wasn't just relieving one bridge, it was actually providing confidence across the network of cross-border commerce.
Sir, as I mentioned in my opening comments, we are not security experts. But what we do know is this, is after the Emergency Act was invoked, the blockades were lifted very shortly thereafter. And these, what I refer to as pop-up protests on public highways, it all stopped. And I think our industry was relieved, the Canadian public was relieved, and I think the supply chain was relieved.
I'd share that view. My only concern was that it took longer than I would have wished for the invocation to have proceeded. Brian Kingston, could you indicate whether your advice to the department to which you referred went beyond the measures that you've tabled today, or are they the same?
We provided a few more details, specifically with respect to CBSA staffing and infrastructure upgrades. We've also recommended and support things like the completion of the Gordie Howe Bridge as a secondary, so a little bit more detail.
Could you table that letter with us?
I would be happy to, yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Lukowski, if I have more time? 10 seconds. Thank you. I won't ask my next question.
Merci.
Thank you, Senator Harder. Perhaps you can ask your colleague to ask that next question. Senator Patterson, 5 minutes.
No questions for now, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Voulez-vous laisser votre 5 minutes?
Do you want to give Mr. Harder your 5 minutes, given he had some questions?
Thank you.
Allez-y, Monsieur Harder.
Go ahead, Mr. Harder.
It's, club loyalty, I guess. I appreciate that. I just wanted to follow up with Mr. Kingston has said that he will table his recommendations. Mr. Lukowski, has the Truckers Association formed in a written statement or request its views of what actions government could consider or governments could consider to avoid or better prepare for the next event?
Just in general, what we've said is that I think you need to get, it's far for us to tell the enforcement people how to enforce, how to tell bridge operators how to operate their bridges, and how to tell provincial and federal authorities how to talk to each other. But we do believe, and it's a simple suggestion, that if everyone gets around the table to develop a plan, and there may be parts where industry can't be involved because governments want to talk to themselves, just themselves, or the enforcement people alone. But we do believe the first step is everybody needs to get at the table that's responsible for those aspects at all those crossings to develop a plan and individual plans. It can't be cookie cutter. Every crossing is different.
Thank you. That's a very good point to make. Can I go back, Mr. Lukowski, to your expressed concerns with regard to the industry itself and the challenge of recruiting to your industry? Could you tell us whether or not the events at the border themselves have been an obstacle to attracting potential drivers because of the risks of border interference or the like?
Sure. Border uncertainty is a challenge for our industry, and it continues to be a challenge. Truck drivers want to drive, and they're obviously aware that the roads aren't always going to be clear, and the border's not always going to be easy to go over. But the short answer to your question is yes, it did have an impact. Yes, there were a number of people who handed their keys in.
Mr. Lukowski, did you have contact with your counterparts in the United States with respect to some of the issues that were raised? In that there's a parallel set of regulations with respect to vaccination restrictions and cross-border movements by the United States. So even the relief that you sought, were it to be granted, would not allow your truckers to enter the United States because of United States rules. What kind of relationships did you have with your counterparts on this matter?
We worked together in both the American Trucking Association and the Canadian Trucking Alliance issued statements similar to those that were read into record that work together. Let's push this date out farther to where we can get vaccination rates up, educate more people on the benefits of vaccination, and also bring stability to the supply chain. ATA had a slightly different position. They have more of a legal issue whether the government in DC had the ability to impose this mandate. It was more of a legal issue than ours was, but we did work together.
Well, they are a more litigious country than we are, and probably that reflects itself. What are the vaccination rates in your American counterpart organization?
We haven't looked at it since probably the spring, so I don't know if it's changed, but based on previous, it was significantly lower than it is in Canada. It's somewhat, I would say this, sir, that it is reflective. I guess it all depends what you define vaccination now too, right? Is it 2, is it 3? But at the time it was 2 vaccinations. And at the time, our nation, I believe we hit over 85%, and in some parts almost 90. In the United States, I don't believe they got over 75%. And so their rates were very reflective of their society, as was ours.
Correct. And that would have its implications with respect to public health in both locations.
Correct.
If I could just conclude, Brian Kingston, with a question with respect to the OEM sector.
10 secondes, Monsieur Harder.
10 seconds, Mr. Harder.
10 secondes. Okay. In terms of further or future investments in Canada, is the issue of cross-border fluidity in the minds of your member organizations when they consider expansion in Canada?
Yes, it is. It's a key part of Canada's overall competitiveness, and this came on the heels of previous disruptions to the supply chain, including stoppages at the Port of Montreal. So it is on the minds of companies when they think about investing in Canada.
Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Harder. Your time's up. Thank you, Mr. Kingston. There are 3.5 minutes left. Don't think we can have another round of questions on that basis, so I'd like to thank the witnesses for being here with us tonight. Again, for those who have committed to undertake to provide the documents, that they should do that in the coming days with the clerk. We'll be suspending to go in camera for the final portion of this evening's meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.